Okay, animal communication, introduction and evolutionary history. I didn't actually record this, but I talked a bit about the possibility of finding extraterrestrial life that's intelligent enough to speak to us, and whether if it came, it would be like us trying to speak to a cat. Communication, passage of information through our different senses, sight, scent or chemical, sound, touch, taste, perhaps, and that influences, those signals influence behavior of other animals, and the transmission of information via a signal benefiting both signaler and receiver. Well, with a caveat, sometimes a signaler is actually sending a deceptive signal. So, with that in mind, is there a difference between a cue and a signal? Well, you can read this. Cues are leaked, easily assessed, info an animal may not want revealed. Signals are functional, contain info that animals want to reveal because it benefits it, and that includes revealing deceptive signal. Yeah, I guess I do. Do you remember that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, do you know when humans started to have language? Like, why humans started to have language? We were talking about how if you don't learn language by a certain age,
Yeah.
you don't have the ability to
Learn it later.
learn it. So what?
Yeah.
Have researchers?
Well, they were there's this gene that produces a protein is FOXP2, and we have a form of FOXP2. It's highly conserved. It seems to be associated with language because if people have a different form of it, they usually can't talk. Okay. Now, in other species, there's like been 3 amino acid substitutions, which doesn't mean very many. But all vertebrates, it seems, have it. And it wasn't until Svante Pabo and his group in Germany started being able to sequence archaic DNA that they thought, well, maybe we can tell, whether Neanderthal actually had language based on the idea of the FOXP2. Now, it's not really a strong inference because they could still have the FOXP2, and it might just be that they can't make language as well as we can, but they still have the brain to do it. Because obviously, a lot of language requires, dedicated part of our brain towards understanding it. So, but they had the same FOXP2 that we did. So we're inferring with, maybe a little trepidation that they were able to speak. There's also been some work on with linguists. So you can make a phylogeny of languages the same way you can make a phylogeny of species. There's the Indo-European languages that we're all familiar with, Latin and all that. There's many others. There are some languages that there's only one language for that group, and then over the hill, let's say in New Guinea, they have about 8,000 different languages or something like that. It's tremendous. And language, certainly, being able to speak a language or not tells the other person a lot about. In fact, not just speak, just think about accents and, right, dialects. I mean, a lot of us probably make decisions about other people based on how they talk. what dialect they speak. Okay.
So they think speaking came before writing.
Oh, by far.
Like not writing words, obviously you can't speak, but even like writing in like pictures, like how you imagine what they.
There was nothing like that until pretty recently.
So then it could have just been some sort of genetic mutation
Yeah.
that allowed them to speak.
Now the thing is, there's other animals that actually make different sounds for different things. Prairie dogs and ground squirrels, they make a different sound when a hawk is coming compared to, let's say, a coyote or a snake.
If they get more mutations, when they be able to form a language.
Yeah.
Over the course of
Well, yeah, there's more to language though than just different words. There's also, the whole grammatical structure. But certainly other species, as you would expect, that it wouldn't come full-blown in only one lineage and not another. So it's probable that language has been evolving, and in certain lineages there's stronger selection for it, or it's just a quirk, and then there's strong selection for it. So, but anyway, there was a guy who did he did a phylogeny of languages, and then he laid that on a phylogeny of different human populations. And then he also looked at, more importantly, certain words that seem to be universal versus some words that are only for one language. And he claims that he's shown, now there's been some dispute about it, but there's certainly a signal there that 100 and something thousand years ago, or 200,000 years ago in Africa, our language was started. Now, of course, there's Neanderthal and archaic humans, Erectus and all that, and we don't know what kind of language they had. So I'd say it's been in a human lineage, it's probably been incrementally favored for better and better language.
So like, keeping on this topic, they've done studies where they're able to give vocab to a chimp or a gorilla.
Oh yeah,
And then
yeah.
within their natural settings though, do they have their own vocab as well?
Well, they certainly have, in captivity they've had a mother teach a child. In wild settings, you can have one group that comes up with a new way of doing things, let's say, and others look and it actually spreads. A good example is Japanese macaque monkeys. There was this troop that lived down near the shore, and there was a river coming through it, and it was sandy too, right? So a lot of times the food would drop in the sand and people would kind of brush it off. The monkeys would brush it off and then eat it, and it's still sandy, right? Well, this macaque actually, I don't know, maybe it was by accident, maybe she dropped it in, had some food and she dropped it in the water, then took it out, it wasn't sandy anymore. And then also, it seems like they like their food to have salt in it. And so they were dipping it in the ocean as well. Well, this cultural information actually spread to the whole troop, where almost every member was doing it except for the oldest. Now the oldest were set in their ways, I've always had food with sand on it, and I'm not going to change now. Okay. But it did spread. So in that sense, there can be transmission from one to another, and there's only one group of chimps that actually hunts with a stick, bush babies, and there's been I saw another paper recently, so there's been some demonstration of that. Now whether they actually use it in terms of words, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think they do it in terms of words, but they certainly might have more meanings to the hoots and all that they do. than we give them credit for. Okay. So, rich language, easy word. Each word can have many meanings. Most understood communication is verbal in us, but there's others certainly. Animals, limited repertoire. Many signals mean only one thing. Communicate via various means, mostly not auditory. Mainly because, well, auditory is good for some things, some habitats or some situations, and not for others. So, the basic attributes of communication: you need a sender, a signal, and a receiver that recognizes that signal. It doesn't have to explicitly recognize that signal, but it knows what it means. And, of course, that signal could be a fixed action pattern that initiates a response in others around it to do some other pattern. So if you think about bees in a hive, honeybees, a lot of the dance that they do is actually a fixed action pattern. They don't go out and learn how to do signaling about where food sources are. It's a fixed action pattern. They're always going to be able to do it. Now, they come in with some information about where there's a food source, which direction, how high it is, perhaps even what kind of food it is. They do a whole waggle dance that tells everybody else around them that there's food here. And then they all go out and go find the food. And they're not thinking, oh, I'm going to go out and find food. This is what initiates everything with them. Yep, there we go. Goddamn cops. So, this is what they do. There's a waggle dance, information, the others and that same one go out and forage at that location. Okay? They don't have to think about it. And then there's others where there's intentional thinking, learning how to, obviously, how to talk. The message, now it can be a visual message, a scent, a sound, tactile, vocal, even other ways to communicate, electrical signals, echolocation. Okay. Communication is usually for members of your own species, but I don't know if I really agree with that. But some signals and messages have evolved to communicate with other species. So, examples are alarm calls within a group to group members, or warning signals, or something like that. But of course, there's a lot of stuff going on where there's a signal between, let's say, a prey item and a predator, like the pronking business, or a male bird that's brightly colored, but tells the hawk that's coming in, I see you, so don't waste your time. The communication, if it's actually both are getting it's honest, it's real information that they're both the sender is trying to send to the receiver, then it's usually adaptive for both sides. For mating displays, all that kind of stuff. So it contributes directly to the animal's fitness. All sorts of things like that. The antelope and the cheetah, it's actually, the antelope is saying, don't chase me, and doesn't have to expend the energy because the cheetah sees and says, it's an honest signal. I wish I could chase you and get you, but I can't, so don't even waste my time. So, the sender and the receiver must have the appropriate mechanisms for sending the signal and actually receiving it and being able to translate that information. So sometimes it's structures. Well, like ears. We have ears. We use them for all sorts of different things. We also use them for language. And if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be able to obviously communicate. So if we're deaf, if you have one individual who's deaf and one who's not, and one's talking to the other, well, it's not going to do very much good. Poison dart frog, right? Aposematic coloration, that's a pretty bright signal. A lot of things that are warning colorations they have to be bright. You don't want to be inconspicuous in that situation. You wouldn't want a camouflaged individual. Well, why use camouflage if you have a toxin that keeps things away? They're not necessarily voluntarily sending a signal. It's part of its morphology, but other frogs and other animals that might want to eat it. So it's basically walking around saying, "Don't eat me," even though it's not trying to say that. One signal, sometimes two messages. What other use might this bright coloration have besides deterring predation, let's say? Yeah, find a babe. Exactly. So, a lot of times now, usually there's sexual dimorphism, but usually, a lot of times the male is bright, but in this case both are, but they both might use that as a signal for mating and courtship. Okay. Obviously, visual, these are different ways they communicate: visual, auditory, chemical, touch or tactile. There's a nice touch. Chemical, electrical, echolocation. I got chemical signals. So a whole bunch of them. Some that we don't have. So for those of us who went to the Mojave, of course, rattlesnakes, they're pit vipers, and they can receive, information about something's warmer than something else. But that other something else, they're not those rodents, let's say, are not trying to give that signal out. It's just something that happens. Okay. So that's more of a cue. Okay, here we go. So, anyway, the common senses we have, and then there's others. Obviously, electric. There's also, let's see, what else? Oh, echolocation, that sort of thing. In fact, so those are ultra high frequency kind of sounds, but beyond what we can normally hear. We already did. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, so as far as visual signals, how do you guys know when fruit is ripe? Changes color? Yeah.
That's the guy at the grocery store.
Yeah, well,
Exactly.
that's the best thing to do. I mean, obviously, you go to the produce section, you ask the guy, what's the best watermelon, let's say. Yeah, I agree. But birds, when they want to eat fruit, they can't do that, unfortunately. I guess they could try, but they wouldn't get very far. So anyway, plants are actually communicating as well. They're saying, come, eat me. Now, when a bird comes along and eats those blackberries, sometime later he'll poop it out away from the parent plant. Sometimes close by, maybe he's actually sitting on the parent plant just eating and eating and eating. He goes underneath. Other times far away. And so, let's see, what was this? Oh, yeah. So, a lot of times we have what are called anthocyanins, which are pigment-producing proteins. In fact, one of the researchers, Jeannie Vandergon, is doing stuff with anthocyanins and the Silver Sword Alliance in Hawaii, the one that kind of radiated. So, there's also, it turns out a lot of birds can see in the UV spectra, which we can't. So, and as you know, a lot of insects especially do for pollination. So if you actually look at it, at something in the UV spectrum in terms of what the flowers look like, it's almost like a landing strip for insects. But there's also UV spectra in this, and so that changes in terms of how ripe the fruit is as well. So, but there's all kinds of different, visual communications. So it's between plants and animals, between animals and animals, all that. So there's a bunch of pros and cons. It's transmitted instantly. A picture is worth 1,000 words, carries a lot of information. Let's see, highly directional and specific. So like those fruits, or like golden frog, that was, it's pretty direct. The receiver is getting the signal loud and clear. Let's see. Oh, yeah, it can be done with body color. So think about breeding plumage, or sexual dimorphism between males and females, and that's all part of signaling and sexual selection. So cons, can't really go over a long distance necessarily. Easily blocked by interference. Let's say you're in a dense forest. It's dark and dense and there's trees in the way, so it only goes so far. In a situation like that, you're probably better off making an auditory signal. So, so who are the male birds singing to? Females? Anybody else? Other males? Anybody else? How about yeah, could be. Absolutely. So, let's see this. This was a white-throated sparrow. They put playback speakers in various territories, and then let's see, number of so this tells about intrusions from, let's say, other males, that in fact the playback is keeping the other males away until they finally figure out what's going on. I did a lot of that when I was doing my master's degree. I had a playback, and I also had a stuffed varied thrush. His name was Harold. Other male varied thrushes would come in and peck at him. He didn't fare too well. In fact, actually, after a while, the only place you could find him was in a bar. drinking a lot. He looked disheveled, the whole bit. It's kind of bad news. But anyway, you can see sometimes that intrusions. Now, see, there was already, of course, a predator there. So, another very thresholding that territory. So, he got up in arms. So, this is more of the same stuff. Mate attraction. The females, so let's see. Mean distance was less, and mean trill rate was higher when it went to white crown number 1 or white crown number 2. Same sort of thing with Cassin's finch. Mean song length. So, let's see, what did they do here? I think they present and absent. Oh, okay. So, I forget exactly what they did. I'll have to look it up. Sorry, you guys. But anyway, it pretty much shows that Cassin's males are responding. I'm pretty sure. Cassin's males are responding differently. So, so obviously, what are the pros and cons? Same sort of thing. You don't have to worry about visual obstacles. Can be done in the dark. Can be fast and immediate. Can be lengthy and complex. Subject to interference. Distorts over distance. Works only in the present. So, a chemical scent would actually work later on, right? Whereas like visual stuff, for the most part, and auditory stuff, it only works in the present. So there's a guy named Marler, I think it was Peter Marler, who looked at songbirds and the kinds of different songs they sing in different habitats. So in open habitats, I think a lot of the songs are, I'm trying to think, kind of lower than in forest habitat, where there's a lot of the singing is higher frequency. And it all depends on the habitat and what sound carries better than others. Now, there's another thing that sound signals. There's a lot of birds that are kind of ventriloquists. And they can actually make it sound like they're actually over here when they're really over here. So not only can they give you, real knowledge on a signal, that could be on a signal, but they can also, instead of calling in like a predator, they can make it seem like they're here on their territory, but the predator is being deceived. So I'd say all of us probably use olfactory signals. Just think about how you guys felt who were out in the Mojave Desert on day 2 or 3. There's definitely olfactory stuff going on. Might have been on a signal too, that you stank pretty much. Okay, so anyway, there's a lot of olfactory signals are really common. Obviously insects with pheromones, all that kind of stuff. A lot of mammals, especially mammals who are nocturnal, right? So a visual signal isn't going to do much good. Let's see. It's really kind of interesting. There's the naked mole rat. There's a mole rat queen. Okay, she's the only one that breeds. And like a lot of other social insects, where there's a queen and all the workers are related and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's not quite like that, but she also actually stops other females in the group from breeding by emitting a pheromone. So it's kind of a signal, well, it's a signal that they automatically respond to. And then there's also, she's also pretty nasty. So she goes around and beats people up who aren't doing what she wants them to do. So. And remember, chemical olfactory, same thing with like plants and animals, plant-animal interactions. So you can have fragrance for certain flowers are more fragrant than others. Usually fragrance is flowers that kind of, their main pollinator comes out at night. They emit a fragrance. Or think about that, the orchid that was deceiving the male wasp, because the orchid kind of made a little thing that looked, well, roughly like a female, but the main thing was it actually copied the pheromone to draw the male in. So it was using an olfactory signal to bring a male in. Male tried to copulate with the flower, didn't get very far. Oh, by the way, yeah, go on.
Oh, because you were talking about smells and plants that they release these fragrant smells. What about foul smells? Like some plants release these foul smells, like female ginkgo.
Mm-hmm.
Smells like rotting flesh.
Yeah, there's a lot of flowers that actually look like rotting flesh and smell like rotting flesh. Okay, and of course flies come in to lay their eggs, and they're being deceived as well. They get pollinated to go off to another flower that smells like rotting flesh, and they carry the pollen back and forth. And there's convergent evolution on that in Asia, in Australia, many different places, South America. It's a pretty common deceptive tool. So certainly olfactory chemical smells, and we'll get to that later in terms of what animals are actually trying to communicate. In many cases, of course, they're trying to deceive. So here's pretty cool. This is a ground squirrel, and the squirrel is actually, let's see, tongue flicks. Oh yeah, the squirrel is essentially hiding itself in a chemical smell from the rattlesnake. So, in terms of what the snake is actually responding to, instead of smell, well, they're using smell, but they think it's another snake coming around. They don't really do a lot of tongue flicks, right? So, as you can see, both with just the squirrel and not having all that aroma all over itself, the snake is obviously very, responding. But in this case, the rodent is actually trying to hide that smell. Kind of what you might do in certain circumstances, You might be undercover and you want to smell like a bum, and so, whatever. Anyway. So the sender, first of all, doesn't have to be present, and it can also happen anytime. Good for darkness, can transmit over distance. There's another, it's great. There's this fruit in Southeast Asia called durian. Anybody ever heard of that? Yeah. So it stinks. In fact, if you go to Singapore and you take a durian fruit into a building, they'll arrest you. Okay? It's not to be done. But it smells like kind kind of like, well, different durian fruit, kind of different, but like a moldy, awful locker room. Okay, it's I don't even know, you wonder, okay, why? Because the main dispersers of durian are mammals. Well, they can smell that, but it actually tastes really good. But the smell is completely contrary. It's weird. It's really weird. So, okay. Obviously it dissipates over time, but at least it stays there for a certain period of time. You have to return and remark, but like I said, auditory, you can't really do that. Well, you can do it right then and there, but you can't, you can keep having to make, let's say, a bird making song to warn intruders away. So smell is, and also, of course, smell, there's more of an olfactory language that's going on here. That a lot of animals, like I said, so the naked mole rat uses smell to stop other females in the group from actually breeding. I don't think the females obviously think about not breeding, it just shuts them down. Okay? So olfaction can do all sorts of different things. So, tactile. It's amazing, if you really think about it, how responsive humans are to touch. Don't you think? I mean, well, we've got all these, nerve endings and all that, and a lot of it has to do with our fingers, but it's also, a lot of that stuff, that tactile stuff, feels really, really, really good. And you can see how it would have a huge effect, especially in a social group, tactile communication. Of course, you could also do it another way, tactile boxing. One guy knocks the other guy out. That's not such a nice way to do it, right? But in general, there's a lot of examples of what are called, social grooming. In fact, okay, but there's also a lot of times younger individuals or less dominant individuals are actually doing it to the more dominant ones. But I don't know exactly, I'm sure they've worked it out, but I think there's other cases where, everybody does it to everybody. Hello. You just missed a really cool video.
We should play it again for her.
Yeah, we should.
Oh, you should play it again.
Yeah.
Nah. Sorry. So, anyway, there's more dynamic going on there. So tactile is kind of huge, especially for social animals. But, anything. Obviously, when a cheetah is running down a gazelle, there's some tactile stuff going on there as well. So, a lot of fish use electrical fields to let others know. And, of course, a lot of, electric fish, they not only use it to stun their prey, but to also perhaps warn predators that, you mess around, I'm going to give you a pretty good shock. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, let's see. So,
Animal porn, baby.
yeah, exactly. Okay. So, evolution of communication. So here we have the old comparative method, right? And we're looking at, let's say, how in a group of related birds, shorebirds or ocean birds, they have developed these alternate forms of communication. So at the base are pelicans and gannets, and then they do certain things pre-takeoff. They do sky pointing, the boobies, alternate wing waving, slow wing waving, throwback, rapid flutter. So all these different, you can see how these are homologous behaviors. They are inherited from their from a common ancestor, but at the same time, each one has actually developed their own sort of, let's say, mating dance. Have you ever seen, let's see, albatrosses going through mating, or let's say cranes? They go through this huge ritual, and you know, different species of albatross have different sorts of rituals. So when you look at communication signals, and of course these signals can be for all sorts of different things, but let's say for mating in this in particular, it's a nice way to actually look at doing a comparative analysis in terms of both ancestor inheriting it as well as under natural selection. And also, there's another thing too. If you think about it, a lot of these behaviors have to occur during development. So, like for a lot of songbirds, of course, the males are practicing. They have got that underlying template for each species, let's say, but then they have to hear the song and practice it. And so this sort of thing, the same sort of thing, they go through actually developing these kinds of signals. Now, I don't think it goes like, the ontogeny, phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny. In other words, a lot of times, if you look at a chicken embryo and a human embryo, at one point they both have tails, they both have gill slits, so it's kind of, in a way, kind of recapitulating phylogenetic things that when we were fish or whatever. But I don't know if the development of behavior acts in the same way. I'm not really sure. I think it's probably just one of those things that you get better and better at it. But a lot of it, I don't know. Yeah. So it turns out, remember noctuid moths, we talked about those and how they respond to signals ultrasound signals from bats. And depending on how far away, we'll get more into it when we do the next chapter, but depending on how far away the bat is, it will either kind of, if it's far away, just fly off somewhere. If it's really close, it actually kind of turns the moth into, they lose control over all their flight muscles, and they do kind of like, whirly whoops, almost a random movement anyway that might confuse the bat. Well, it turns out that these same things that are designed pretty much, or their function is to take evasive action and hear bats, they also use in terms of communication amongst each other. So, let's see here. So, a whistling moth ancestor may have had mechanoreceptor cells that gave it, what did I do? Oh, I didn't finish that off. Anyway, So it turns out this shows this thoracic plate. They also have a way, obviously, to make these ultrasonic sounds as well. There's no reason if you're just trying to evade bats to do that. I don't think. Maybe, I wonder if they do that. That's a good question. I'm thinking maybe they could also screw up with bats if they put out an ultrasonic signal as well. I'm not that fine. Yeah.
What's the difference between auditory and this?
Well, ultrasonic is just the spectrum of sound that we just can't hear. That's all. So it's
like
auditory.
Ultraviolet.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I don't know what dogs obviously can hear higher pitches, but bats and moths much higher.
So would dogs be using ultrasound?
I don't think they're not. I don't think they're. It's high enough for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean a dog whistle. You've heard it. It's not much.
What,
But a dog is. Oh, okay. Anyway, it's very hard to hear anything, but the dog responds to it. So, but that would be interesting if they actually, because other animals use sound to deceive opponents. Let's say.
I know blue whales have sounds that you can't hear.
Yeah. Right.
They're really loud.
Yeah, they're usually. Oh, that's right. Yeah, and they obviously travels over huge distances. Yeah. So, the ancestral signals can be actually. This is exaptation. Can be kind of co-opted for new functions, right? Kind of like what was going on with the moth responding to the bats, as well as using it as a means of communication. So here's another phylogeny for bowerbirds. I guess they use the catbird as the outgroup. So the ancestral state is monogamy in birds, serial monogamy. But in this case, they have a polygynous system where the male builds a bower, kind of like a lek, attracts the female. If you remember, there was one, I think the satin bowerbird likes blue objects. And so the females come in, and if the bower is good enough, then she mates with them. But he doesn't help her out at all. So polygyny is where you have a male and many females. Okay. But it looks like that same sort of thing, in terms of bower building and bower decoration, was co-opted for an aggressive display. And if you remember the eagles that were talon locking, they did both as a antagonistic interaction, playing a game of chicken, and also, of course, in mating display. So the males and females do the same sort of thing. They do the cartwheels. They just don't hold it off to the very, very bitter end. So you can actually, in terms of a comparative method, you can see how communications can be co-opted for other functions, not just for mating in this case. So there's that. Agonistic behavior is basically, being mad at each other. Those little monkeys that we saw, snow monkeys in Japan, they seem so, cute and relaxed, but these are related, and they're actually pretty nasty. I got attacked by a bunch of macaque monkeys when I was in Singapore. I had really long, big, bushy hair, It was huge. And I guess I said something like booga booga or something to one of them. And all of a sudden I was surrounded by this troop. of, mad macaques. It was a bad deal. From what I understand, the Singapore government, they're the ones that have banned durian fruit inside. I guess they knocked them all off. Too many people were getting harassed by these monkeys. But, so just so you know, they're not just all nice critters, and just don't go up to them and pet them. Or if you go to Japan, I don't know if you want to get into the hot tub with them. Who knows? Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So, a lot of, anybody know what sensory exploitation is? What do you think? Sensory exploitation.
Definition, right?
A situation where a signaler is able to tap into a pre-existing sensitivity or bias in the perceptual system of a receiver.
Right?
Oh,
That's
there.
right there. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, so, for example, let's say there's these birds that feed on these nice red berries. And they're living next to, we're almost time to go, but they're living next to a nuclear power plant that has a meltdown like Chernobyl. There's some mutations, and one of the mutations are these red feathers that happen. And it turns out that males with red feathers on their forehead, they look kind of like maybe a berry, just kind of. And so the female starts responding to that signal because she's already got a pre-existing sensory bias for a red berry. Salute. Salute. So this is there's these spiders, and the net stance probably may have evolved first as a predatory thing, and then it was finally used for the different function of mating as well. So here's a female with a whole bunch of eggs. More sensory exploitation, where a signaler is able to tap into a sensitivity. So female guppies originally were attracted to orange spots. Females with stronger preferences for males with orange spots. Sensory exploitation, the domain that the signal is maladaptive for the receiver. So there was something in the environment that the female was sensitive to in terms of orange. And then basically it was a matter of transference. Okay. So same sort of thing, sensory preferences. So there can be preferences that the species has actually never encountered before. We'll stop here, but that the female, let's say, still responds to, let's say, a larger crest, or let's say large crest for the most part. Breast, small crest, okay, and breast crest, not much. Okay, so I think that's that. Okay, we'll stop there.